Hello class, and welcome to our presentation, Sexual Ethics in Judaism. So in this presentation, we will analyze Jewish moral attitudes on sex by looking at two major sources: the Tanakh, or Hebrew Bible, and we will take a look at some rabbinic commentary from the Mishnah and Talmud. And once we review some basic Jewish teachings on sex, we will also look at selections from Sefer Nashum, the Book of Women, from the Babylonian and Jerusalem Talmud. So with this in mind, let's take a look at some of our major basic teachings. So here is our first teaching. According to the Jewish tradition, sex is good. That is, sex is not seen as something which is evil, but rather it is considered to be a mitzvah, or a commandment. As it is written in Genesis chapter 1, God blessed humanity and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it." So again, sex is interpreted as a mitzvah, a divine commandment, and therefore sex is not evil, but is rather good. That is, all things that come from God are good. God commanded human beings to engage in sex, and therefore sex is a good thing. Now, because sex is considered to be a mitzvot, or a commandment, according to the Talmud, celibacy, or refraining from sex, is forbidden, because it violates the commandment to be fruitful and multiply. However, according to the Talmud, only one exception is made. Rabbis who have a passion for studying Torah can be exempt from sex and marriage. And this brings us to our second teaching. Sex is kiddushin, or holy, between married men and women. As is written in the biblical book of Proverbs, "Let your fountain be blessed, and rejoice in the wife of your youth, a lovely deer, a graceful doe. May her breast satisfy you at all times. May you be intoxicated always by her love." So again, sex is considered a holy thing when it is between married men and women. Having said this, not all sex within the confines of marriage is holy. So for example, marital rape is forbidden according to Jewish sacred texts. Men should not make fast love with their wives, but rather they should engage in what you might call foreplay beforehand. And some rabbis argue that oral sex and anal sex between married couples is forbidden. But having said this, here we have a selection from the Mishnah that argues contrary to that final point. And so it says, "Since a man's wife is permitted to him, he may act with her in any manner whatsoever. He may have intercourse with her whenever he so desires and kiss any organ of her body he wishes, and he may have intercourse with her naturally or unnaturally." So by saying kiss any organ of her body, this is often translated as a man may engage in oral sex with her, and in terms of intercourse unnaturally, anal sex with her. But there is a caveat here, and we look at the final sentence: provided that he does not expend semen to no purpose. That is, because of the command to be fruitful and multiply, most rabbinic commentators believe that it is a sin to expel semen on the ground. So again, if a man is going to engage in sexual intercourse, then he must expel his semen vaginally. And some rabbis are strictly against male masturbation because, again, in this way, a man's semen or seed is expelled on the ground and it is wasted. And so this brings us to our third highlighted teaching. Sex is to be used primarily for reproduction. That is, sex is to be enjoyed between a man and a woman, but nevertheless, the rabbinic tradition teaches that the primary function of sex is to have children. Now, because sex between a man and a woman is considered holy, or kiddushin, when it is done within the confines of marriage, the following point is emphasized. Adultery is forbidden. And we have a teaching here from the book of Proverbs. "And now, my child, listen to me, and do not depart from the words of my mouth. Keep your way far from the loose woman, and do not go near the door of her house, or you will give your honor to others, and your years to the merciless. and strangers will take their fill of your wealth, and your labors will go to the house of an alien. And at the end of your life you will groan when your flesh and body are consumed. So in other words, keep away from the loose married woman who wants to have an affair with you on her husband. If you do these sorts of things, according to the book of Proverbs, your life will be utterly ruined and destroyed. So there are great consequences for engaging in adultery. And as is emphasized again from the book of Proverbs, but he who commits adultery has no sense. He who does it destroys himself. He will get wounds and dishonor, and his disgrace will not be wiped away. For jealousy arouses a husband's fury, and he shows no restraint when he takes revenge. He will accept no compensation and refuses a bribe, no matter how great. So clearly, the Jewish tradition is against the practice of adultery. But what about premarital sex between consenting adults? Well, generally speaking, premarital sex between consenting adults is not forbidden in the Jewish tradition. There is not an actual commandment against it. But it is discouraged within the Jewish community as well as frowned upon. However, one text in the Hebrew Bible called the Song of Songs, also known as the Song of Solomon, is an erotic poem of sexual longing between a man and a maiden, both of whom are unmarried. So the kind of rediscovery of the Song of Songs in the 20th and 21st centuries has kind of given voice to this idea that in the Jewish tradition, maybe premarital sex is not as discouraged or as bad as it once was. And just to kind of conclude our major points, I'd like to end with this quote from Nachmanides, the medieval Jewish scholar and rabbi. One should know that sexual union is holy and pure, when it is done as it should be, at the time it should be, and with proper intent. So in other words, sexual union is a good thing. It is holy and it is pure. But it is only holy and pure when you do it in accordance with the commandments, that is, in accordance with the rules. Now, one of those rules, of course, is to engage in sex within the confines of marriage. But according to the Jewish tradition, what does sex within the confines of marriage look like? So for this, we're going to take a look at some selections from the Talmud. So in our first selection from Sefer Nashim, the Book of Women, it is written, it is permissible for a woman to authorize her husband to ignore her conjugal rights. That is right from the first sentence. As is highlighted, a woman has conjugal rights. That is, she has sex rights over the body of her husband. But there are times when a husband can ignore her conjugal rights. So if we continue, when does this apply? When he has children and has already fulfilled the mitzvah to be fruitful and multiply. But, however, if he has not fulfilled the mitzvah of being fruitful and multiplying, he is obligated to engage in sexual relations whenever his conjugal duties require until he fathers children. For this is a positive commandment of the Torah, be fruitful and multiply. So in other words, a woman is basically the one who calls the shots in the married relationship. When she wants to have sex, a man cannot refuse her until he actually helps her to bear children. And the Sefer Nashim is very specific as to how often a man should satisfy his wife's conjugal rights. So as is written here, healthy men should fulfill their conjugal duties every night. So if a man is healthy and part of like the aristocracy, he has a duty to fulfill his conjugal duties every night. If one is a worker or a laborer, they should fulfill their conjugal duties twice a week, but if they work in another city, once a week. Donkey drivers should fulfill their conjugal duties once a week. Camel drivers once every 30 days. And a seaman or a sailor at sea should fulfill their conjugal duties once every 6 months. So again, very specific as to the number of times a man is obligated each week or each month or each year to fulfill his conjugal duties. And lastly, also from the Book of Women, it says here, a man should never compel his wife to engage in sexual relations against her will. Instead, relations should be with her agreement, preceded by conversation and a spirit of joy. So again, the sexual relationship between a man and woman should be something which is celebrated and enjoyed, and a man should never compel his wife to have sex against her will. And this is kind of evidence to show Jewish teachings against marital rape. So in conclusion, according to the Jewish tradition, sex is good. Sex is holy when it's between a married men and women. Sex is to be used primarily for reproduction. Adultery is forbidden. And premarital sex, although there are no teachings against it, it is nonetheless discouraged in the Jewish community.